I was really happy to see people take to social media to post the statement, I understand that I will never understand, but regardless, I stand with the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think the reason I appreciate these words so much is because I think anyone who posts, I understand that I will never understand, is saying, I'm not black, I don't claim to have all the answers, but I'm conscious, I empathize, and I'm competent of being better. I want to be a part of the solution. And to me, that is far more authentic and genuine than any non-black person taking to the internet to claim that they have it all figured out. But I also think it's very important that we don't use I understand that I will never understand as an excuse to make no effort to try to understand. In other words, for some people, I think I understand that I will never understand could be another way of saying I don't really care enough to try to understand much either. And if that is what we're doing, if that is why we're posting that, then I might ask you to reconsider the use of that because I think you're selling yourself short. Now, I'm not white, but I've grown cognizant to know that I'm white enough to be the recipient of white male privilege. And I believe it's my responsibility to at least clarify why saying all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter is actually saying that Black lives don't matter. Let me explain. When I think of racism, the first thing that comes to mind is overt racism, like a white person yelling the N-word at a black person, right? But racism can also take on many less obvious shapes, such as a disregard, a negligence, or a disrespect towards someone, which is oftentimes synonymous with their own inability to identify and articulate their own cultural, political, economic, or historical contributions to what we know as whitewashing, white preference, or white privilege, and therefore lends itself to racism or being racist. In other words, it isn't just the obvious attack on a black person that makes one racist. Unawareness or lack of education or just blatant ignorance around black issues, even if you don't think you're a malicious person, can easily lend itself to racism or being racist. To help drive this point home that unawareness or an insensitivity can be synonymous with racism, if you said, I love you to somebody, and I stepped in and I said, well, what about me? Don't you love me too? Or if someone broke their leg and I said, well, what about my legs? Why are you helping them? Even though my legs are fine. Or if you saw someone drowning, I don't think you would just stand there and watch them drown while you proclaim, all lives matter, you know. If someone was suffering from breast cancer, I wouldn't counter with, well, what about colon cancer? Which, by the way, I don't even have, but what about it anyways? So what is it if we apply that same kind of behavior to the real world? For example, in 1998, when Matthew Shepard was tied to a fence and beat to death for being gay. Imagine if at that time I had the nerve to remind the world, hey guys, you know, in the history of mankind, I bet far more heterosexuals have died than gays. And their lives matter too, you know. What about in 2017 when it finally surfaced that over 80 of our female entertainers who were coerced into sexual acts by Harvey Weinstein? Imagine if I replied to these victims by saying, listen, women have been exploited all throughout history. You've got to understand that men's needs matter too. Just make better decisions next time. Anyone in their right mind would agree these reactions could only come from the mouth of an oblivious, uninformed, ignorant asshole. And if you agree, then by your own logic, it should be very clear why saying all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter, especially in the way people are doing so right now, is incredibly insensitive and problematic. Most of us would reach out and rescue the drowning. I think most of us could empathize with the queer community and would march with them in support of LGBT rights. I think most of us would speak out and support and protect the brave women fighting for the future of our young and vulnerable little girls. So why would I behave any differently just because the victim is a person of color? Yes, all lives are supposed to matter. It's true. But when incidents of great significance occur pertaining to our black brothers and sisters, like the senseless killing of George Floyd, that warrant extra focus and a re-examination of how we're treating our black community members, and I respond to that moment with, well, that is sad, but all lives matter, then I'm not only being incredibly insensitive to their cause, I'm also complicit in their oppression, because by doing so, I completely sideline any effort and any bloodshed to spotlight and correct the problem that got us here in the first place. So fast forward to today in 2020, when it's clear how our black brothers and sisters are disproportionately and violently targeted time and time again by police. And we've needlessly lost the lives of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain, and countless others. Not to mention, after already having endured 400 years of oppression, can you see how in this moment, when the black community is working so hard to bring awareness to systemic racism, how insensitive it is to say, well, all lives matter, so. If I counter this moment with all lives matter, then I'm refusing to acknowledge the oppression our black community still experiences on a daily basis. And therefore, I'm the same dickhead that lets you drown. I'm the same dickhead that starts preaching about straight lives during a Matthew Shepard candlelight vigil. And I'm also the same dickhead blaming women for being Weinsteins. So can you see how that is the most inconsiderate way to address the moment? Can you see how counterproductive those words are, especially right now? Because whether they realize it or not, this person has fallen into a trap of denial that prevents them, and therefore our country, from experiencing real change. And whether they realize it or not, this person is attempting to sidestep the discomfort one may feel when forced to acknowledge a life of privilege beyond their comprehension. And therefore, the all lives matter person is really saying, I don't want to give an ounce of credibility to the Black Lives Matter movement, because if I do, then my consciousness may force me to take responsibility for my part in some of this. And black lives just don't matter enough for me to get that uncomfortable. Though their lips mouth something that sounds like, look how compassionate I am because I think all lives matter, listen closer. The person that responds to the Black Lives Matter movement, or to the marginalization of our black brothers and sisters, or to any community with all lives matter, doesn't really mean all lives matter. Because if they did, that person would be out marching in the streets to defend and protect all lives, including black ones. Listen, the Black Lives Matter movement is not about denigrating your worth or the worth of other ethnic groups. It is about highlighting a specific problem for this community. It is about recognizing and empathizing with our other fellow humans whom have been victimized. Black Lives Matter is an expression of a desire to rid the world of racism in all of its forms, and an act of solidarity, not black supremacy. So remember, if the words Black Lives Matter triggers you, it doesn't mean only Black Lives Matter. It means all lives can't matter until all lives really matter. And that's why saying all lives matter in response to the Black Lives Matter movement implies that you don't really think Black Lives Matter. And until Black Lives Matter, then and only then will the words all lives matter have any meaning. Together, I think we can build a world where all lives truly matter if we just take a second to acknowledge that systemically, all lives really haven't mattered for a very long time. If you think this breakdown may help someone have an aha moment, feel free to pass this along. Meanwhile, let's educate one another and take care of one another too. Peace.